Hey everyone, it's Walker at Full Spectrum Laser and welcome to our second first time tutorials to RE3. So let's get started. What I want to do here is cover the whole user interface of RE3 and kind of go over most of the buttons and manipulation and show you guys how to get started. Again, let's drag in our Shiba file. We'll go ahead and show that in folder and drop that in right here. Notice again that it has this default kind of speckled look, and that's because it's on halftone dither. We move back to threshold, it's going to pick up just the black, just the white, nothing in between. And on right above me, you'll see the Shiba for my wallet. That's the file name. That file name is just an engraving. We can rename this project as well. So let's call this Shiba. If we wanted to, we'll take a look at how to create a new project. This gives me a whole new workspace. So if we just go ahead and fit everything on here, we have a whole new workspace to start, creating our files. We could start designing in here while we're running this actual workspace, which is really cool that you can do that. Now I do have this file and I wanted to start going through the tools. So we'll first start right about here at the camera. The camera, I'll go ahead. This is a Muse 3D and it's just going to ask me if the honeycomb's present and the bottom panel is present. This is very important because it changes functions if these are in or not in. So just make sure that this is proper. We'll go ahead and continue. And just wait a couple of seconds. It is taking 9 images and stitching them together. Why does it do that is because when it comes to other lasers with a single image capture, what it does is it's got a fisheye lens, and the further you get away from center, the less accurate it's going to be. So what our setup does is take very accurate images and stitch them together. And if your camera is aligned properly, you'll notice that it's stitched very well. So the blue blobs, so it's not more of a secret anything. Some people were asking, what are they? It is just where the camera got extreme reflection. It doesn't know what's going on because it reflected so much light there. So we just kind of filled in saying, hey, the camera didn't see it too well right there because of the reflection. Doesn't mean your camera's broken, anything's broken. That's a good thing that it's detecting these actual reflection points. And again with the camera, if you have a Muse core and it doesn't have a camera, you can still do these sort of set up your laser for a job, but the camera feature is nice because you can set up your design to utilize the most space possible. Let's say you have a phone or something where you want this engraving to be very exact across this edge. Well, even though it's a square, essentially, when it comes to the actual work area, you could line this up close to the edge. And let's use our arrow keys and get it extremely accurate. Now the accuracy is within a couple of millimeters. It's very accurate, even more accurate on the Muse 3D than the 2D. And then you can just run your perimeter right here to double check. Always want to double check just in case the camera alignment is off. So we have our camera capture. We can actually clear this capture. We'll fit most of it. Clear this capture. And we'll get back to what I was saying is user interface. We'll just talk about that in general. We have our vector trace background image. This is where you have like a drawing your kid did or something of that sort where it utilizes the camera as a scanner. It scans it and creates an image like the dog here. We'll cover that in another video and go over it a little more in depth. But then we have our estimate job time. That is as simple as taking these power settings from your engraving and estimating how long it's going to be. Now this guy's 5.2 inches, roughly 5.32, and by 5.1. So we are just going to hit the estimator, and it estimates that engraving to be 6 minutes long. If we were to scale this image or give it DPI of a 500, we'll estimate it again. It's going to be almost 12 minutes. So you can see how that estimation's pretty useful. A lot of the times I use the estimate. Let's say I want to get a job done. I'm focused on my project, but I have some things to do in 30 minutes. Well, if I hit that estimator, I know I have enough time to get this done before I leave to whatever I'm forced to do from my family. And then run perimeter. That's actually going to run the perimeter of the job with the laser. You see the red laser actually tracing where it's going to be. And then run the job is obvious. Before we move on to these guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about the files right up here. Let's move me right here. So this is going to be our layer and objects. This is where your jobs are. This is our projects right here, and this is the project. It's just an engraving, right? We're just engraving this on something, whatever it may be. Well, as soon as I add the ellipse tool, not only is this an engraving, I have just created a engraving, a raster, and then a cut, a vector. So now we have in the layers, we have our ellipse, which is just the circle, and the Shiba engraving. Now in this scenario, if you see on the left hand side, it will cut first and then engrave second. Why is that? Because the cut is actually on top of the actual engraving. I can make it engrave first by just simply dragging it on top of the vector cut. Why is this important? Well, you don't want to cut something out, especially wood that doesn't really like to lay flat. It slightly curves, bows, does all kind of crazy stuff. And sometimes when you cut it, it actually drops and shifts. Not only will that drop and shift, and then when it goes to engrave, throw off the engraving, it also takes that engraving out of your original focus. So it's very important if you're creating an RE3 to keep your engraving on top in the layer selection. Again, we can move to a new project, work on this while this bad boy is doing the job. Then we have the zoom in and out, which is very straightforward. We'll zoom out a lot. Oh my goodness, I want to see the whole work area. This is overwhelming. We'll just fit all to our work area. Zoom in again, and we will grab the little hand. It's fairly universal for most design software to kind of walk around the work area. Let's fit all again, so we have the whole view. And this little magnet tool is our snap tool. There's so many snap features in here. You can snap the grid lines, you can change the functions of those snaps, and this is important if you want things to be lined up as you're designing in RE3. Again, you don't have to design in RE3. You can design in, say, Illustrator or Inkscape and import it into RE3 just the way it is. And then all you have to do is manipulate your power settings. So it doesn't matter where you design from, it can still be imported. Our pointer tool is simply a selection tool, and we can move things around. And then we have our sub selection tool, which kind of creates objects where you can select them, manipulate them. And there's lots of sort of assets and tools you can utilize for designing specifically in RE3. We have our lasso tool where we can create cuts or select the actual objects, and then we have line, rectangle, circle, polygon, triangle, star. These are all creating vectors. These are all cuts, so they're built in. If you just want to cut, I know some people coming from Crickets, there's some default designs. Well, we have default designs in here as well. We'll get rid of that guy. And let's say we want to merge these two objects. We'll just hold Shift, select this guy, and then create a compound object, which is essentially, it's called a union. We're merging these two shapes together. What's cool is if you highlight over them, you can still see where they are. So if you want to undo that by hitting Control Z, or right over here in the user interface, there's just many different ways to skin a cat. And then we have our pen tool, very typical of creating vectors in design softwares. And we can select that, we can join this and merge it again, all sorts of stuff. Let's select this, merge it. This is how you create compound objects, all sorts of crazy stuff. Some of the stuff Tim and I have created in our other videos is just the same sort of idea, creating the design you want. Let's go ahead and delete that, start new, let's delete our curve. Go ahead, the knife tool, let's go ahead and draw a rectangle. We have our rectangle, and then we're going to select the knife, and we are going to cut it right here. Now we have essentially two objects. Very straightforward again. Just going over these tools. We have text. Type in your text. Now, when you text, when you utilize the text tool, you only use facts, correct? Yes. So FSL is the best. Now, you'll see that the text is on the left-hand side is just, it says text. And when you select it, on this bottom right-hand side, you'll see it has a power setting selection that is vector. Let's say you don't want to cut these out or vector mark these texts. You want to engrave the text. Very simple. We'll just right click and hit rasterize. That rasterizes it, and now we have our raster properties instead. So let's go ahead and move me again. We'll zoom in on this. So I'm going to go back. We'll give this guy a fill. So we'll infill it. So now it's got a fill, and I will rasterize it. There we go. Now this is an engraving. We can put this on our wood. Let's go ahead and capture this again. Go through our 9-step process. And this way we can engrave the text that we create. We have a great video on how to curve text. I'll just go over that in a little bit. So now, zoom out. Now we can engrave this on our piece of wood. I'm sorry, I'll zoom in on here. Let's go. We don't want to vector mark it. So that guy's ready to go. Go ahead and scale this. Let's do wide, 10 inches. You can scale from there really easily. Let's fit all again. Again, manipulate it to fit this piece of wood. I don't want this video to be too long, but I just wanted to show you guys the basic tools on how to design in RE3 and get it set up for your laser. So for this piece of wood, this is actually a 1/4 inch birch, and on my engraving I'm going to do a power of 100, and I know it's a Muse laser. It's got the 45 watt tube rather than the 90 watts in our pros, so I will probably engrave this for a nice engraving around 50 speed. That just gives the laser more time to penetrate the material. Again, power and speed correlate with one another, so if you're not getting the depth or darkness you want in an engraving, you slow the speed down to give it more time for that power. Also, we can change the DPI, dots per inch, right here, which means it's going to get more resolution. It's going to take twice as long or 4 times as long, but it will be deeper and darker. Really just depends on what your application is and what you want it to look like. Let's see. We have our jog controls. This actually controls the laser head from the software, which is again really cool. And then we have our video feed. If the laser's running, we can actually see it. And let's see if we can jog and move and watch. So that video feed is really neat. This was actually up in our last update. We're controlling the laser and looking at our design. We can actually watch it run as well. Very cool feature we just added. We're always adding new features, and we'll continue to cover them in videos like this as they come out. So I hope this helped you. Look forward to the other ones. We have tons of videos to show off RE3, which is probably the best reason to go with FSL, because it is very user friendly. If you have any design software background, it makes sense. If you don't, you can just import files that you either find online or purchase. It's very easy. Let us know what videos you'd like to see in the future, and until next time, keep making.